I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd check her phone obsessively, refreshing my email every 5 minutes like some teenager waiting for a text back. But there I was, 58 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee getting cold, staring at that screen like it held the answer to everything. The morning light was coming through the window, that soft golden kind that usually makes me feel peaceful. But today, it just felt like it was mocking me. Everything was too bright, too cheerful, too normal for what I was feeling inside. My daughter Jennifer had sent me a message the night before. Just a quick text, the kind that seems innocent until you really read it. "Hey Mom, wanted to let you know we got tickets to Emma's dance recital next month. It's going to be amazing. She's been practicing so hard." And I'd replied immediately, like I always do. "That's wonderful, honey. Can't wait to see her perform. What time should I be there?" The response came back fast. Too fast. Like she'd been dreading having to type it. "Oh, Mom, about that. We only got a limited number of tickets and they went to Brad's mom this time. You know how it is. Maybe next recital." Maybe next recital. Those 3 words kept circling in my head like vultures. This wasn't the first time, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Last year, it was Jackson's soccer championship. The year before that, Emma's school play. Every single time, there was some excuse, some reason why Linda, Brad's mother, got the golden ticket and I got the maybe next time. And every single time I'd smiled through it, told myself it was fine, that I understood, that there would be other opportunities. But sitting there in my kitchen, watching my coffee go from warm to lukewarm to cold, I realized I'd been lying to myself for way too long. The thing is, I'd always tried to be the good grandmother. Not the pushy kind, not the one who shows up unannounced or criticizes every parenting decision. After my husband Daniel died 6 years ago, I'd thrown myself into being there for Jennifer and her family. I'd babysit at the drop of a hat, never complained when plans changed, always brought homemade cookies and little gifts for the kids. I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Be helpful, be available, be grateful for whatever time you got. But somewhere along the way, being accommodating had turned into being an afterthought. Linda was different. Linda was the grandmother who planned elaborate birthday parties, who took the kids on expensive vacations, who always had the newest toys and the biggest presents. She was retired from some high-powered corporate job and had the money and the time to be super grandma. Me? I was still working part-time at the library, trying to make my retirement savings last, living in the same modest house I'd lived in for 30 years. I couldn't compete with Disney trips and iPads and whatever else she was showering them with. And I'd told myself that was okay, that love wasn't about money, that the kids would understand. But would they? When Linda was always there for the big moments, and I was the one getting the maybe next time? I picked up my phone and opened the family photo album Jennifer had shared last month. There was Emma's birthday party, huge decorations, a professional photographer, a cake that looked like it cost more than my weekly grocery budget. And there was Linda, right in the center of every photo, beaming. I scrolled further. Jackson's soccer tournament. Linda in the stands, holding a sign she'd made, wearing a custom t-shirt with his number on it. I kept scrolling, my chest getting tighter with each photo. How many of these moments had I missed? Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't want to be there, but because nobody had thought to make sure I had a place. I put the phone down and looked around my kitchen. This house held so many memories. Jennifer had grown up here, had her first birthday party in this backyard, learned to ride her bike on this street. After Daniel died, I'd thought about selling it, moving somewhere smaller, but Jennifer had begged me not to. "Mom, this is home," she'd said. "The kids need to have their grandma's house to come to." So I'd stayed. I'd kept every bedroom ready, kept the cookie jar full, kept the art supplies and board games and everything else they might want when they visited. But those visits had gotten fewer and farther between. I thought about calling Jennifer right then, but I knew how that conversation would go. She'd apologize, explain that Linda had already committed to coming, that they didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings by uninviting her. She'd promised that I'd get to come to the next thing. And I'd say I understood, because that's what I always did. But I didn't understand, not anymore. I didn't understand how my own daughter couldn't see that she was slowly erasing me from her children's lives. My best friend Carol called around 10 that morning. She always seemed to know when something was wrong, even before I said anything. "What's going on?" she asked, and I could hear her concern through the phone. I told her about the recital, about the text, about all of it. There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then she said something that stopped me cold. Margaret, when are you going to stop being a doormat? A doormat. Is that what I'd become? I wanted to argue with her, to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Because maybe she was right. I'd spent 6 years trying so hard not to be a burden, not to be the demanding mother-in-law, not to compete with Linda, that I'd made myself invisible. And you know what happens to invisible people? They get overlooked, they get forgotten, they get the maybe next time. Carol kept talking. I'm not saying you need to throw a fit or cause drama, but honey, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to tell Jennifer how this makes you feel. And more than that, you need to build your own relationship with those kids. Stop waiting for permission to be part of their lives. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time thinking about what she'd said. Build my own relationship with the kids. What did that even mean? I couldn't compete with Linda's money or her grand gestures. But maybe I didn't need to. Maybe I'd been so focused on trying not to be pushy that I'd forgotten I had something to offer too. I just needed to figure out what that was. I spent the rest of that day in a kind of fog, going through the motions at work, but not really present. My coworker Diane asked if I was okay at least 3 times, and each time I just nodded and smiled. But I wasn't okay. Something had shifted inside me with Carol's words. I felt angry, yes, but more than that, I felt determined. I was done being passive. I was done waiting for scraps of time with my grandchildren. I was done pretending it was fine to be the backup grandmother. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old journals from when Jennifer was little. I'd kept detailed notes back then, before life got so busy, before Daniel got sick, before everything became about just getting through each day. I read about the little rituals we'd had, the way we'd bake bread together every Sunday, the nature walks where we'd collect leaves and make art projects, the storytelling sessions where I'd make up elaborate tales about brave girls going on adventures. When had I stopped doing things like that? When had being a grandmother become about showing up when invited rather than creating moments worth remembering? I stayed up late that night, reading and remembering and planning. If Linda wanted to be the grandmother with the money and the big gestures, fine. I would be something else, something better. I would be the grandmother who really knew these kids, who created traditions, who gave them something money couldn't buy. I just had to be brave enough to make it happen. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. First step, I needed to talk to Jennifer. Really talk to her, not just send pleasant text messages back and forth. I called her and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. She sounded surprised but agreed. We met at this little cafe near her office on her lunch break. Jennifer looked tired when she walked in. She'd been working long hours at her marketing job, and it showed. She ordered a large latte and slumped into the chair across from me. Thanks for meeting me, Mom. I've been meaning to call you. That's what she always said. Always meaning to call, meaning to visit, meaning to include me. Intentions that never quite turned into actions. I decided not to ease into it. Jennifer, I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. She looked up from her phone, a little startled. I never started conversations like that. I was always the one who was understanding, who went with the flow. It's about the kids, about my relationship with them, or rather my lack of one. She started to protest immediately. Mom, that's not fair. You know we love having you around. But I held up my hand. Let me finish, please. I know you love me. I know you want the kids to know me. But honey, I'm being pushed to the sidelines, and I don't think you even realize it's happening. I told her about the recital tickets, about all the other times I'd been the second choice, the backup option, about how it felt to see photos of family events I hadn't been invited to. Her face changed as I talked, cycling through surprise, guilt, defensiveness, and finally something that looked like understanding. Mom, I had no idea you felt this way. You never said anything. And there it was. The core of the problem. I never said anything. I never spoke up, never complained, never demanded my place in my own grandchildren's lives. I know, I said, and that's partly on me. I was trying so hard not to be difficult, not to add to your stress, but I can't do that anymore. These kids are growing up, Jennifer. Every recital I miss, Every game I don't attend, that's time I can't get back. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. You're right. God, Mom, you're absolutely right. I've been so caught up in juggling everything, and Brad's mom is just so insistent. She makes all these plans, and I feel bad saying no. But that's not an excuse for making you feel like you don't matter. We talked for 2 hours in that coffee shop. Really talked, the way we used to before life got so complicated. I learned that she'd been feeling overwhelmed by Linda's intensity too, but hadn't known how to set boundaries. Linda would text her constantly, would show up unannounced, would volunteer for everything before anyone else had a chance. And Jennifer, exhausted and guilty and trying to keep everyone happy, had taken the path of least resistance, which meant giving Linda what she wanted and hoping I'd understand. I need you to stop hoping I'll understand, I told her. I need you to include me. Actively, intentionally include me. Not just when there's room or when it's convenient. I'm their grandmother too, and I deserve to be part of their lives. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. You're right. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. But I didn't want apologies. I wanted action. I wanted change. And I was ready to make it happen, with or without Jennifer's help. Over the next week, I did something I'd never done before. I reached out directly to my grandchildren. Emma was 12 now, old enough to have her own phone, and Jackson was 10. I sent them each a text message. Nothing demanding, nothing that would make Jennifer uncomfortable. Just a simple, "Hi, sweetheart. I was thinking about you today and realized it's been too long since we spent time together. Would you like to come over this Saturday? We could make cookies and I could teach you that special recipe you always loved." Emma responded first. "Hi, Grandma. That sounds fun. Can I really come over?" The fact that she seemed surprised by the invitation broke my heart a little. When had it become unusual for a grandmother to invite her grandchild over? Jackson's response came a few minutes later. "Yeah, can we make chocolate chip? Those are my favorite." I coordinated with Jennifer, and that Saturday, I picked up both kids myself. No waiting for someone to bring them to me, no fitting into someone else's schedule. I was taking charge. When they climbed into my car, I saw them differently somehow. Not as small children who needed constant supervision, but as real people with their own thoughts and interests and personalities. Emma immediately started telling me about a book she was reading, some fantasy series I'd never heard of. Jackson was going on about a video game. I realized I knew almost nothing about their current lives. I'd been so focused on being available that I'd forgotten to actually engage. At my house, we didn't just make cookies. I asked them questions. Real questions about their lives, their friends, their dreams. Emma told me she wanted to be a writer someday. Jackson confessed he was struggling in math but was afraid to tell his parents because they were already so busy. I listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't in too long. And somewhere in the middle of measuring flour and mixing batter, something shifted. They started to relax around me, to open up, to be themselves. "Grandma Linda always has her house perfectly clean," Emma said at one point, looking around my comfortable but cluttered kitchen. "It's kind of scary, like you're afraid to touch anything." Jackson nodded. "Yeah, and she's always taking pictures for her Facebook. She gets mad if we don't smile right." I felt a little guilty at the tiny surge of satisfaction those words gave me, but I also recognized the opportunity. "Well, this house is for living in," I said, "and making messes, and being yourself. That's what Grandma's houses are for." As the afternoon went on, we talked about everything. I told them stories about their mom when she was little, stories they'd never heard. I showed them old photo albums I'd forgotten I had. We made a huge mess in the kitchen and didn't care. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. And when Jennifer came to pick them up, both kids begged to stay longer. "Can we come back next week?" Emma asked. "Please?" I looked at Jennifer, who looked at her children's happy faces, and then at me. "Of course," I said. "How about we make this a regular thing? Every Saturday if you want." And that's how it started. Every Saturday became our day. Sometimes we'd cook, sometimes we'd work on art projects, sometimes we'd just sit and talk. I started learning about their world. I downloaded the books Emma was reading so we could discuss them. I learned the basics of Jackson's video games so I could understand what he was talking about. I wasn't trying to be the cool grandmother or compete with Linda's extravagant gestures. I was just being present, consistently and authentically. The thing about consistency is that it builds trust. Within a month, Emma was calling me just to chat about her day. Jackson started asking me for help with his homework. They weren't coming to see me because they had to, or because their parents made them. They were coming because they wanted to. Because I'd become someone important in their lives, not through grand gestures or money, but through showing up and paying attention. But not everyone was happy about this new arrangement. Linda noticed, of course. How could she not? Her own grandchildren were suddenly less available, less interested in her elaborate plans. She started calling Jennifer more, texting more, making more demands. And Jennifer, bless her heart, finally started setting boundaries. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Jennifer told me about it later. Linda had called her, upset that the kids had declined another Disney trip because they wanted to be at my house for our Saturday tradition. "What's so special about going to Margaret's house?" Linda had asked, and apparently the question had been dripping with disdain. "She doesn't do anything fancy for them." Jennifer told me she'd taken a deep breath and said, "That's exactly what's special about it, Linda. She doesn't try to buy their affection or impress them. She just loves them. She knows them. She's present in their lives in a way that matters more than any trip or gift ever could." I cried when Jennifer told me that. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from finally feeling seen, finally feeling valued. It wasn't about competing with Linda anymore. It was about being the kind of grandmother my grandchildren actually needed. But change isn't easy, and there was pushback. Brad, Jennifer's husband, wasn't thrilled about his mother's hurt feelings. There were some tense family dinners where Linda would make passive-aggressive comments about how some people have so much free time to spend with the grandchildren. I bit my tongue during those moments, remembering all the times I'd been excluded, all the maybe next times I'd endured. This wasn't about revenge or one-upmanship. This was about finally claiming my place in my family. The real test came about 3 months into our new routine. Emma's dance recital, the one I'd been excluded from, was approaching. I didn't say anything, didn't push, didn't ask if I could come. I'd learned that demanding inclusion doesn't work. What works is making yourself indispensable. 2 weeks before the recital, Emma came to our Saturday session with something on her mind. I could tell she was nervous about something. We were making homemade pizza, and she kept starting sentences and then stopping. Finally, as we were spreading sauce on the dough, she said, "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something." My heart sank a little. Was this where she told me Linda had convinced them I was trying to cause trouble? That I needed to back off? But what she said instead completely surprised me. "Mom got 3 tickets to my recital. 1 for her, 1 for Dad, and 1 for Grandma Linda. But I want you there. Not her. Is that terrible of me?" I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. Really looked at her. At 12 years old, she was already learning about divided loyalties, about how complicated family could be. "It's not terrible at all," I said carefully. "But honey, you need to know that I would never want you to feel caught in the middle." "But that's just it," she said, and her voice cracked a little. "Grandma Linda doesn't really see me. She sees this perfect granddaughter she wants me to be. She's always fixing my hair or telling me to stand up straighter or commenting on what I eat, and she takes a million pictures, but she never actually asks me how I feel about anything. You do. You see me. The real me." I hugged her then. This brave girl who was learning to speak her truth. "Whatever you decide, I support you," I told her. "And I'll always see you, Emma. Always." She talked to her parents that night. I wasn't there for that conversation either, but Jennifer called me afterward, crying. "Mom, Emma wants you at the recital." She was so clear about it. She said if she could only have one grandmother there, she'd choose you. Brad's upset, and Linda is going to be devastated, but we can't ignore what Emma wants. This is her moment. Part of me felt triumphant, but a bigger part of me felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that Linda had focused so much on appearances and grand gestures that she'd missed the actual connection. Sad that these children were being put in a position to choose at all. "Jennifer," I said, "what if you got another ticket? What if we both went?" "We can't afford it," she said. These tickets were really expensive. And that's when I made a decision. Then I'll pay for Linda's ticket. I have some money saved. It's important to me, but I also don't want to be the reason Linda misses this. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Mom, you don't have to do that. After everything." But I did have to. Not because I was being a doormat this time, but because I was being the kind of person I wanted to be. The kind of grandmother I wanted my grandchildren to see. Someone who could be strong and advocate for herself without being cruel or petty. "I'm not doing it for Linda," I explained. "I'm doing it because Emma shouldn't have to choose, and because I want to show her that you can stand up for yourself without tearing others down. Does that make sense?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "When did you get so wise?" I laughed at that. "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being invisible. But I don't want to become someone I don't recognize in the process." So that's what happened. I bought the ticket. Jennifer called Linda and explained that they'd found a way for both grandmothers to attend. Linda was stilted in her thanks, clearly confused by the gesture. But she came to the recital. We sat on opposite sides of the auditorium, which was probably for the best. But here's what mattered. Emma looked into the audience before her performance, and she saw me. Her face lit up in a way that made every moment of difficulty worth it. She danced beautifully, and afterward, she ran to me first. Not to Linda with her professional camera and expensive bouquet of roses. To me with my simple flowers and my genuine pride. Linda watched this happen. I saw something shift in her face, something that might have been understanding or might have been resentment. I wasn't sure which, and I realized I didn't need to know. This wasn't about Linda. It had never been about Linda. It had been about me finding my voice, about me learning that love isn't passive, that relationships take effort and intention and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. After the recital, we all went out to dinner. It was awkward at first, Linda and me at the same table, both trying to talk to Emma and Jackson, both trying to be present. But something interesting happened. With both of us there, competing for attention, Jennifer finally stepped in and took control. She directed the conversation, made sure everyone got heard, set boundaries when Linda tried to monopolize the evening. My daughter was finding her voice too. As we were leaving the restaurant, Linda pulled me aside. It was the first time we'd really spoken directly in years. "I don't understand you," she said. Not meanly, just honestly. "I've given these children everything. Trips, gifts, experiences. And yet, they choose you. Why?" I thought about lying, about being polite, about saying something that would make her feel better. But Carol's words echoed in my head. "Stop being a doormat." So I told her the truth. Because I know them. I listen to them. I see who they really are, not who I want them to be. And I'm consistent. Not just when it's convenient or fun, but every single week. She looked at me for a long moment. "That's not fair. I've tried to be involved. I've done everything I could think of." And I believed her. She had tried in her own way. "Linda," I said gently, "you tried to buy their love. I just tried to earn it." It wasn't a perfect ending. Linda and I didn't become best friends. She still struggled with understanding what had changed, still tried to compete with elaborate gestures. But something had fundamentally shifted in the family dynamic. I wasn't the backup grandmother anymore. I was just grandmother, fully and completely. The Saturdays continued. They became sacred to all of us. Sometimes we'd do big things, like day trips to museums or hikes in the state park. But more often we'd do small things. We'd sit on my porch and read together. We'd work in the garden. We'd cook meals that didn't always turn out right and laugh about it. We'd talk about hard things, like Emma's anxiety about middle school or Jackson's frustration with feeling different from the other kids. One particular Saturday stands out in my memory. It was raining, one of those steady autumn rains that makes everything gray and dreary. Emma had called me the night before, her voice tight with stress. "Grandma, can I still come over tomorrow even if it's raining? I really need to get out of the house." Something in her tone worried me. This wasn't just about wanting to spend time together. Something was wrong. When I picked her up the next morning, she was quiet in a way that wasn't like her. Usually she'd be chattering away before she even got her seatbelt on, but today she just stared out the window at the rain. Jackson wasn't with us. He'd gone to a friend's birthday party. It was just going to be Emma and me, and I sensed that was what she needed. Back at my house, I made us hot chocolate while she sat at the kitchen table, still not saying much. I didn't push. One thing I'd learned over these months was that kids will talk when they're ready, not when you demand it. So I just sat down across from her with our mugs and waited. "There's this girl at school," she finally said, her voice small. "Her name is Madison. She used to be my best friend, but now she's turned everyone against me. She tells people I'm weird, that I'm too sensitive, that nobody should hang out with me." Her eyes filled with tears. And the worst part is, everyone believes her. Even the girls I thought were my friends. My heart broke for her. I remembered being 12, how brutal middle school could be, how much it hurt when friendships fell apart. But I also knew that swooping in to fix everything wasn't what she needed. "That sounds really painful," I said. "Tell me more about what's been happening." She talked for over an hour, about how Madison had started excluding her from group chats, about how other girls would whisper and laugh when she walked by, about how she'd started eating lunch in the bathroom because sitting alone in the cafeteria was too humiliating, about how she'd been pretending everything was fine at home because she didn't want to worry her parents, who were already stressed about work and money and everything else. "Does your mom know?" I asked gently. Emma shook her head. "She's so busy. And Dad, he just tells me to ignore it, that bullies are looking for a reaction. But Grandma, I can't just ignore it. These are people I have to see every single day. This is my whole world right now." We talked about strategies, about the difference between tattling and asking for help, about how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell an adult what's happening, about how her worth wasn't determined by what Madison or anyone else thought of her. But mostly, I just listened. I validated her pain, told her she wasn't overreacting, that what she was going through was real and hard and not her fault. "You know what your Grandma Linda would say?" Emma said at one point, and there was something bitter in her voice. "She'd tell me to just be more popular, to try harder to fit in, to wear better clothes or act different or something. She doesn't get that I can't just buy my way out of this." I thought carefully about my response. Your Grandma Linda means well. She comes from a world where image and presentation matter a lot. But you're right. This isn't something you can fix by changing yourself. The problem isn't you, Emma. The problem is that some people haven't learned how to be kind yet. We spent the rest of that rainy Saturday making soup from scratch and watching old movies. Every so often, Emma would bring up another detail about what was happening at school, another hurt she'd been carrying. And each time I'd listen and validate and help her process. By the time Jennifer came to pick her up that evening, Emma looked lighter somehow. Not fixed, not magically healed, but less alone. After they left, Jennifer called me. "I don't know what you did today, but Emma actually opened up to me tonight. She told me about what's been going on at school. I had no idea, Mom. No idea she was struggling this much." Her voice cracked. "She said you were the first person who made her feel like it was okay to not be okay." That conversation with Emma changed something in our relationship. She started calling me more, texting me about little things and big things. When she had a bad day, I was one of the first people she'd reach out to. Not because I had all the answers, but because I'd created a space where she could be honest without fear of judgment or being told to just get over it. Jackson's breakthrough came differently. He'd always been the quieter one, harder to read. While Emma wore her emotions on her sleeve, Jackson kept things bottled up. But during one of our Saturday sessions, about 2 months after the Emma situation, he surprised me. We were working on the birdhouse he'd wanted to build. I'd bought the materials and printed out instructions, but neither of us really knew what we were doing. We were making mistakes, having to redo things, getting frustrated. At one point, Jackson threw down his hammer and said, "I'm no good at this. I'm not good at anything." I stopped what I was doing. "That's not true. Where's this coming from?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then it all came pouring out. He was struggling in school, particularly in reading. While other kids in his class were reading chapter books easily, he was still stumbling over simple sentences. His teacher had suggested he might need extra help, maybe even testing for learning disabilities. And he was terrified. "Dad's really smart," he said, his voice shaking. "And Mom's really smart, and Emma's really smart. But I'm not. I'm the dumb one." He was crying now, this 10-year-old boy who was usually so stoic. What if everyone figures out I'm stupid? What if I can't ever catch up? I pulled him into a hug and let him cry. "Jackson, listen to me. You are not stupid, not even close. Your brain just works differently, and that's okay." Some of the most brilliant people in the world struggled with reading when they were your age. Did you know that? He shook his head against my shoulder. We talked about Albert Einstein, who didn't speak until he was 4 and struggled in school. About Thomas Edison, who was told he was too stupid to learn anything. About how intelligence comes in many forms, and just because traditional schoolwork was hard for him didn't mean he wasn't smart. I told him about my brother, his great-uncle Robert, who'd had severe dyslexia and gone on to become a successful architect. Does Mom know you're struggling? I asked. He shook his head. I didn't want to disappoint them. They're already worried about so much. And there it was again, these kids carrying burdens they shouldn't have to carry alone because they didn't want to add to their parents' stress. I talked to Jennifer about it that night. She was shocked and hurt that Jackson hadn't felt comfortable telling her. When did I become the kind of mom my kids are afraid to disappoint? She asked, crying. But this wasn't about blame. This was about recognizing that sometimes kids need a safe adult who isn't their parent, someone they can be completely honest with without worrying about adding stress or causing disappointment. Jennifer got Jackson tested. He did have dyslexia, along with some processing issues, but now that we knew, we could help him. Jennifer found him a tutor who specialized in learning differences. I started reading about dyslexia and bought him audiobooks so he could enjoy stories without the struggle of decoding text. And most importantly, we stopped treating his challenges as something shameful or disappointing. The birdhouse we'd been working on that day? We never finished it according to the instructions. Instead, we made our own design, something completely unique. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And Jackson was so proud of it that he wanted to make another one. We ended up making birdhouses every few weeks, each one different, each one reflecting something Jackson wanted to express. They weren't about following instructions perfectly. They were about creating something, about learning through doing, about finding his own path. These moments, these deeper connections, they happened because I'd made myself consistently available. Because I'd created a space where my grandchildren could be their real selves, struggles and all. Linda, for all her resources and good intentions, had never managed to create that. Her visits were events, performances almost. Everything had to be perfect, documented, Instagram-worthy. There was no room for messy emotions or admissions of struggle. I remember one Saturday when both Emma and Jackson were over, and we were making a complete disaster in the kitchen, trying to recreate some complicated recipe we'd seen online. Flour everywhere, eggs on the floor, the smoke alarm going off because something was burning. We were laughing so hard we could barely breathe. And Emma said, "Grandma Linda would have a heart attack if she saw this mess." "Well," I said, wiping flour off my face, "that's the difference between a showroom and a home. Showrooms are for looking at. Homes are for living in." Jackson nodded solemnly. "Your house is definitely for living in, Grandma." It was one of the best compliments I'd ever received. As summer approached, I suggested we start a garden project together. Not just a few plants, but a real vegetable garden in my backyard. We'd grow things from seeds, learn about where food comes from, have something to nurture and watch grow. Both kids were immediately enthusiastic. We spent several Saturdays preparing the soil, building raised beds, choosing what to plant. We made mistakes, of course. Some seeds didn't sprout. Some plants got eaten by rabbits. Some withered in the summer heat. But that was part of the lesson. Not everything works out perfectly, and that's okay. You learn, you adjust, you try again. Linda heard about the garden and immediately offered to hire a professional landscaper to do it properly. Jennifer politely declined, explaining that the point wasn't to have a perfect garden. The point was for the kids to learn by doing, to experience both success and failure, to understand that good things take time and effort. Watching those plants grow over the summer became a metaphor for what was happening in our relationships. Slow, steady growth, some setbacks, lots of patience and care. But eventually we had tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers. We had something we'd created together, something that couldn't be bought or outsourced or made picture perfect for social media. Emma started bringing friends over sometimes. At first I was nervous. Would they judge my old house, my outdated furniture, my lack of fancy amenities? But something magical happened. They loved it. They loved the freedom to make noise and mess. They loved the cookies and the garden, and the feeling of being somewhere that wasn't trying to impress them. One of Emma's friends, a girl named Sophie, told me, My grandma's house is really nice, but we can't touch anything. Your house is actually comfortable. It was another reminder that what kids need isn't perfection, it's permission to be themselves. Jackson brought friends over too, eventually. They'd work on projects in the garage, build things with old wood and tools. I'd provide snacks and check in occasionally, but mostly I'd let them figure things out themselves. Jackson was flourishing. The tutoring was helping with school, but more than that, he was gaining confidence. He was finding things he was good at, ways his brain worked that were strengths rather than weaknesses. One evening, after a particularly good Saturday, Jennifer and I were sitting on my back porch while the kids played in the yard. She'd taken to coming inside when she picked them up, staying for a cup of tea and conversation. Our relationship had deepened too. We were more honest with each other now, less worried about pretending everything was perfect. "You know what I realized?" she said. "When I was growing up, you were always so focused on taking care of everyone else. Dad, me, everyone. You never really took care of yourself, never put yourself first. And I learned that from you. I learned to make myself small, to prioritize everyone else's needs over my own. It's taken me this long to understand that's not actually healthy." She was right. I had modeled self-sacrifice, had taught her by example that a woman's needs come last. But I was learning differently now, and so was she. We were both learning to set boundaries, to advocate for ourselves, to recognize that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. "I'm trying to do better with Emma," Jennifer continued. "I want her to grow up knowing she has a voice, that her needs matter, that she doesn't have to apologize for existing." I squeezed her hand. We were breaking cycles, changing patterns, becoming better versions of ourselves. And the kids were watching, learning from our evolution. Brad started coming over for our Saturday sessions sometimes too. At first, it was awkward. He'd been Linda's champion, had often sided with her when conflicts arose. But he was seeing what was happening with his kids, how they were thriving with this regular time at my house. And he was starting to question some of the dynamics he'd accepted without examination. One Saturday, while the kids were working in the garden, Brad helped me fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen. As we worked, he said, "I owe you an apology, Margaret. I've let my mother dominate everything for so long that I forgot you're Emma and Jackson's grandmother too, that you deserve equal consideration, equal respect." It was the first time he'd really acknowledged the problem. "I appreciate that," I told him. "But what matters now isn't the past. It's what we do going forward." He nodded. "My mother means well, but she can be overwhelming. I'm working on setting some boundaries with her. It's not easy, but it's necessary." Linda herself was slowly adjusting to the new reality. She'd invited the kids to an expensive resort over spring break, and to her shock, they'd asked if they could skip part of the trip to still have their Saturday with me. That had been a wake-up call for her. She was starting to realize that more money and bigger gestures weren't the answer. She'd even asked if she could come to one of our Saturday sessions to see what we actually did that the kids loved so much. I'd agreed, though I'd been nervous about it. When she arrived, I could see her trying to understand. We were making homemade pasta that day, and it was messy and chaotic and imperfect. Linda kept trying to correct the kids' technique, to show them the proper way to do things. But eventually, she settled down and just watched. At the end of the day, as she was leaving, she said to me, "I don't understand how you do it, how you make them so happy with so little." I thought about taking offense, but I chose to hear the genuine confusion in her voice instead. "It's not about what you do, Linda. It's about how you make them feel. They need to feel seen, heard, valued for who they are, not who we want them to be." She didn't respond, just nodded and left. I don't know if she really understood, but at least she was starting to question her approach, to recognize that something in her strategy wasn't working the way she'd intended. As fall approached again, marking nearly a full year since that fateful text about the recital tickets, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. I'd gone from being the forgotten grandmother to being an integral part of my grandchildren's lives. But more than that, I'd become someone I was proud to be. Someone who spoke up for herself. Someone who created meaningful connections. Someone who knew her worth. The library where I worked offered me a full-time position around that time. It would mean more money, more stability, more professional recognition. But it would also mean giving up our Saturdays. I turned it down without hesitation. These years with Emma and Jackson, while they still wanted to spend time with me, while they still needed me. These were irreplaceable. The job would always be there. This time wouldn't. Carol laughed when I told her about my decision. A year ago, you would have taken that job without even considering the impact on your time with the kids. You would have told yourself they'd understand, that you'd find other time. She was right. I would have. But that version of me was gone. I knew what mattered now. I knew where my priorities lay. Emma turned 13 that spring, entering the teenage years that everyone warned would be difficult. And yes, there were moments of drama and mood swings and slammed doors. But because we'd built such a strong foundation, because she trusted me, she never shut me out completely. Even when she was mad at her parents, even when she felt like nobody understood her, she'd still show up on Saturdays, still talk to me, still let me in. One Saturday, about 6 months into our new routine, Jackson said something that made everything click into place. We were working on a puzzle together, one of those really challenging ones with 1,000 pieces. He'd been quiet for a while, just focusing on finding the right pieces, when he suddenly looked up at me. "Grandma," he said, "I'm really glad you decided to be different." I wasn't sure what he meant. Different how? He thought about it for a moment, his face serious in that way kids get when they're trying to express something important. "You used to be like, nice but kind of not there? Like you were afraid to really be with us, but now you're not afraid anymore. You're just you. Out of the mouths of babes, right?" This 10-year-old had seen what I'd only recently come to understand. I had been afraid. Afraid of being too much, too demanding, too present. Afraid of competing with Linda. Afraid of being compared and found wanting. And in that fear, I'd made myself smaller, less significant, until I was barely there at all. "You're right," I told him. I was afraid. But I'm not anymore. And it was true. Something had fundamentally changed in me. I'd learned that advocating for yourself isn't the same as being selfish. That demanding your place in your family's life isn't pushy. It's healthy. That love requires action, not just good intentions. Carol and I had coffee again a few weeks later, and she laughed when I told her everything that had happened. "Look at you," she said. "I told you to stop being a doormat and you turned into a whole different person." But I didn't feel like a different person. I felt like myself, maybe for the first time in years. Since Daniel died, I'd been so focused on not being a burden, on not asking for too much, that I'd forgotten I had value to offer. I'd forgotten that I deserved space in my own family's life. The library where I worked part-time noticed the change too. Diane, my coworker, mentioned that I seemed happier, lighter somehow. "You're smiling more," she said. "What's your secret?" I didn't know how to explain it all, so I just said, "I stopped waiting for permission to live my life." Jennifer and I had lunch together regularly now, just the two of us. Our relationship had deepened in ways I hadn't expected. She talked to me about her struggles at work, her worries about the kids, her frustrations with Brad sometimes. And I shared my life with her too, not just the highlights or the things I thought she wanted to hear. Real things. How lonely I'd been after her dad died. How scared I was sometimes about getting older. How much her excluding me had hurt, even though I understood she hadn't meant it maliciously. "I took you for granted," she admitted during one of these lunches. "You were always there, always understanding, always flexible. So it became easy to prioritize the people who demanded more. I'm sorry for that. But I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I was looking for change, and change was happening. The holidays that year were different. Instead of being told when and where to show up, I was consulted about plans. My traditions were considered alongside Linda's. And when conflicts arose, Jennifer didn't automatically defer to Linda's preferences. There was one memorable moment at Thanksgiving when Linda suggested we have the meal at her house, like we'd done for the past several years. Before Jennifer could automatically agree, I spoke up. "Actually, I'd like to host this year," I said. "I have some traditions I'd like to share with the grandkids. Daniel and I used to make this incredible stuffing recipe, and I think it's time I pass that down." Linda looked shocked. Jennifer looked surprised. But Brad, of all people, said, "That sounds great, Margaret. We'd love to come to your house." So that Thanksgiving, my house was full again. Really full, not just with people, but with life. Emma and Jackson helped me make Daniel's stuffing, and I told them stories about their grandfather while we cooked. Linda came too, and while it was awkward at first, something interesting happened. Without the pressure to be the center of attention, without the need to have the most impressive spread or the fanciest decorations, she actually relaxed a little. We weren't friends, probably never would be, but we found a way to coexist. As I watched my family gathered around my dining room table, laughing and eating and being together, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not because everything was perfect, not because all the problems were solved, but because I'd finally claimed my place. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't an afterthought. I was grandmother, fully present and accounted for. Emma asked me to help her with a school project a few weeks later. She had to interview a family member about a time they'd faced a challenge and overcome it. As we sat together in my living room, her recording my answers on her phone, she asked, "Grandma, what was the hardest thing you ever had to do?" I thought about lying, about giving her some sanitized version of the truth. But our relationship was built on honesty now, so I told her the real answer. The hardest thing I ever had to do was learn to advocate for myself in this family. To stop being so afraid of being difficult that I let myself disappear. She looked at me, her young face so serious. "I'm really glad you did that," she said softly. "Because if you hadn't, I wouldn't really know you. And that would have been really sad." Later that night, after she'd gone home, I thought about her words. If I hadn't changed, if I'd kept accepting the maybe next times and the exclusions, what would I have missed? All these Saturday mornings, all these conversations, all these moments of real connection. And what would my grandchildren have missed? The chance to know me, really know me, as a person, and not just as a pleasant background character in their lives. I thought about the person I'd been a year ago. So afraid of rocking the boat, so desperate to be liked and accommodating. I'd thought that was love, that sacrifice and selflessness. But real love is honest. Real love sometimes means uncomfortable conversations and setting boundaries and demanding to be seen. Real love means showing up consistently and authentically, even when it's not easy or convenient. My phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Grandma, can we make cookies again this Saturday? I want to learn how to make the ones with the chocolate and the nuts." I smiled and texted back, "Of course, see you at 10. No checking with his parents first, no asking if it was okay. This was our time, our relationship, and everyone understood that now. The recital that had started all of this, that moment when I realized I couldn't keep being invisible, felt like it had happened in another lifetime. That version of me, the one who would have just accepted being excluded and told herself it was fine, seemed like a stranger now. Growth isn't comfortable. Change requires courage. But staying the same, letting yourself fade into the background of your own life, that's the real tragedy. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't reached that breaking point. If I just kept accepting things the way they were, kept being understanding and flexible and invisible. Would I have any relationship with my grandchildren at all by now? Would they think of me as a distant figure, someone they saw occasionally at holidays but didn't really know? The thought makes me shudder. Jennifer told me recently that Linda asked her why I'd changed so much. "She wants to know what happened to make you different," Jennifer said. "I think she's trying to figure out what she did wrong." I felt a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but close. Linda hadn't really done anything wrong. She'd just been herself, loud and present and demanding. The problem wasn't Linda. The problem had been me, letting myself be pushed aside, not fighting for my place. "Tell her the truth," I said. "Tell her I realized I deserved to be part of my grandchildren's lives. That I stopped waiting for permission and started taking action. That I learned the difference between being accommodating and being a doormat." Spring came, and with it came Emma's 13th birthday. She asked if we could have a small celebration at my house, just family. No elaborate party, no professional photographer, no grand gestures, just us, in my backyard, with a homemade cake and board games and conversation. Linda was invited, of course. We'd found our rhythm by then, a way of coexisting that wasn't friendship, but wasn't animosity either. As I watched Emma blow out her candles, surrounded by people who loved her, I caught Jennifer's eye. She smiled at me, one of those smiles that says everything without words. We'd both grown over this past year. She'd learned to set boundaries, to prioritize her children's needs over everyone's comfort. And I'd learned to value myself, to recognize that my presence in this family mattered. That night, After everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the remnants of the party, I found myself standing in my backyard, looking up at the stars. Daniel and I used to do this together, on warm nights like this. I wished he could see me now, see the person I'd become. He'd always been the brave one, the one who spoke up, who demanded to be heard. I'd been the quiet one, the peacemaker. But I'd found my voice. Finally. Better late than never. My life isn't perfect now. There are still awkward moments with Linda, still times when Jennifer gets stressed and falls into old patterns. But the foundation is different. I'm not the optional grandmother anymore. I'm not the backup plan. I'm Grandma Margaret, and I have my own place in this family, a place I've earned through consistency and authenticity and love. The other day, I was at the grocery store and ran into an old acquaintance I hadn't seen in years. We chatted for a few minutes, and she mentioned that I seemed different somehow. "You seem more confident," she said. "More present." I laughed and told her it had been quite a year. As I drove home, her words stayed with me. More present. That was exactly it. I'd learned to show up for my own life, to be fully present in my relationships, to stop hiding behind accommodating silence. I think about that text from Jennifer that started everything. The tickets went to the other grandma. Those words had hurt so much at the time, had felt like a rejection of everything I was. But now I see them differently. They were a wake-up call, a push I desperately needed. Sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that change us for the better. This Saturday, Emma wants to start a new project. She's learning to knit and wants me to teach her some patterns. Jackson wants to build a birdhouse for the backyard. And me? I'm just grateful to be here, to be needed, to be seen. I'm grateful for the courage I found to speak up, to demand my place, to stop settling for whatever crumbs were left after everyone else had taken their fill. I'm not competing with Linda anymore. I don't need to. I've learned that there's enough love to go around, that different relationships can coexist without one invalidating the other. But I've also learned that love requires action, that relationships need tending, that you can't just wait on the sidelines and hope someone remembers to include you. To anyone reading this who feels invisible in their own family, who's been pushed aside or made to feel like they're asking for too much, I want you to know something. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to have your presence valued and your relationships honored. And sometimes, the only way to make that happen is to speak up. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when you're scared of being seen as difficult. Because here's what I learned. There's a big difference between being difficult and being clear about what you need. There's a difference between demanding attention and asking for basic respect. And there's a huge difference between being a doormat and being accommodating. One comes from fear and insecurity. The other comes from genuine love and healthy boundaries. My relationship with my grandchildren is one of the great joys of my life now. Not because it's easy or perfect, but because it's real. They know me, the actual me, not some sanitized grandmother version. They know my stories, my quirks, my strengths and weaknesses. And I know them, really know them, in a way that goes beyond surface-level interactions. Emma called me yesterday, just to talk about a book she'd finished. No particular reason, no obligation. She just wanted to share something with me. That's what all of this was for, those moments of genuine connection. Not the big events or the photo opportunities, but the small, everyday moments of being part of each other's lives. Looking back on that morning when I got Jennifer's text about the recital tickets, I barely recognized that version of myself. The woman who would have swallowed her hurt and pretended everything was fine. The woman who was so afraid of being seen as needy that she made herself unnecessary. That woman is gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knows her worth. This journey taught me that it's never too late to change, never too late to find your voice, never too late to demand your place in your own story. I'm 59 now, and in some ways, I'm just getting started. I have years ahead with my grandchildren, years of Saturday mornings and random phone calls, and being part of their lives in meaningful ways. And I have those years because I was brave enough to speak up when it mattered. So to answer the original question, what did I do when I found out the ticket went to the other grandma? I stopped being the other grandma. I stopped accepting second place in my own family. I found my voice, set my boundaries, and built real relationships based on presence and authenticity rather than convenience and accommodation. And in doing so, I didn't just gain more time with my grandchildren. I gained myself back. And that, it turns out, was the real prize all along.